And then assuming that the agenda that is adopted is a voting agenda, right, where it's only elections, it's not deliberative business, we will have the Saturday format be the webinar format that allows up to 3,000 participants. It is less deliberative. You don't have this same sort of thing where everybody has video, you have to elevate people to participant and drop them back down. But for the purposes of nominating speeches and voting by delegation, the webinar format will probably be sufficient to that task. What I anticipate is that we will have chair, secretary, assistant secretaries, parliamentarian, things like that as panelists in that webinar format on the Saturday, as well as have every state delegation chair as a panelist so that they're able to see all the people whose hands are raised, provide that transparency, be able to collect votes and whatnot, and then be able to elevate attendees into panelists and put them back down as they need to be for example, if there are 5 people to do a nominating speech, we can recognize all 5 of them, have them become panelists so they're able to do the nominating speech and then reconfigure. I don't think that webinar format it's difficult to do a deliberative meeting in a webinar format. So it's going to depend on the delegates on that Friday night when they adopt the agenda, adopting a elections only agenda rather than something like platform or bylaws debate. At that point, I think we run into that 1,000-person cap. In all honesty, I have never been at a convention where a full 1,046 delegation wanted to participate in platform and bylaws. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but generally I've never seen that interest. Does that answer your question, Ms. Robeson? I see a yes. Okay, I'm gonna lower your hand and proceed to Ms. Van Horn. Ms. Van Horn, you have not been credentialed yet, but I think someone will push you into the credentials room soon. Go ahead,
correct. Yeah, I don't need anything, but Jennifer Lamoma, not pronouncing the name correctly, the people in that account have had their hands up repeatedly and no one sees them. They might not know how to raise their hand electronically.
Okay, I will work on that. Pennsylvania Delegate John Waldenberger, go ahead.
Yes, I have 2 of my fellow Pennsylvania delegates getting the 100-person error. Do we have a solution for that, or?
Mr. Fishman, I believe, is working on that. I'm going to recognize Indiana Delegate Jennifer Luoma. Go ahead.
Yep.
Okay.
I thought I unmuted you, Ms. Luoma, but if I didn't, I can try again. Try and unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you are. Good job.
Yes.
Took me forever to figure out how to get the side menu there. We've been Zooming for weeks. So I will confirm that I am registered. We're both using the same connection. I don't know what kind of problems this will be. But I was going to log in with my phone so we could watch this and maybe help out, and I can talk to people while she's doing the computer.
Yeah, just kind of experiment with it.
We're both registered, but we're going to both be on the same connection.
Okay.
Don't know what that.
Does that make a difference?
We haven't figured that out yet, but it's good to know because there is a 1,000-person cap on the meeting configuration. And so one of the ways that we might be able to allow all 1,046 potential delegates to participate is if we get roughly 50 of them to be at least 2 up, then everybody can be in, and we just have to figure out a voting method.
Yeah, that's what.
And I confirm
Fish
that.
Oh,
I
go ahead.
confirm that I keep getting the 100 participation cap, which I think I said, but I don't know if I was clear enough. And I'll leave it at that.
We're just seeing how it
definitely
works on different devices.
I'm hearing that from a lot of people. I'm trying to figure out why that is. That was not the intent. We have previously done a 1,000-person meeting and not had a problem with it. So I don't know if there's some sort of error tonight. Mr. Fishman has been in and out trying to verify that one way or the other. While he's doing that, I'm going to keep recognizing people. New Hampshire Delegate Darryl Perry and then Kentucky delegate Michelle Randall is on deck.
So
Go ahead,
on
Mr.
the 100-person cap thing, there was actually a meeting last week of a New Hampshire state committee that they've also had meetings with way more than 100, and this meeting had that error. I don't know how they fixed it, but they were able to fix it without closing the thing and starting new. But I have a question, and I'm not sure if you covered at the beginning when I had my headphones off. How are presidential nomination tokens going to be handled? I know that the debate tokens are being handled completely separately, but I'm curious about the nomination tokens.
I anticipate the nomination tokens will be handled similarly to the debate tokens, since nomination tokens are not done on a delegation by delegation basis, but are sent into a central location. So we'll probably send out an email token with OPA vote in the same way that we're doing for the debates. The debates are the convention oversight committee, so it's a little bit different, whereas it's not the actual management of the convention itself, but I anticipate the system will be similar. Did that answer your question, Mr. Perry?
Yes, it did. And request for information. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
We're not there yet, and we'll get there later. There's probably going to be a point of debate later. So I have Kentucky delegate Michelle Randall, and then Will McVeigh is on deck, then Mary Pat McVeigh, and then Texas delegate Whitney Bilyeu. Pennsylvania delegate Waldenberger, your hand has been up, but I thought your hand was up before. I'm just asking, was your hand still up from before, or are you seeking to be recognized again? Go ahead, Mr. Waldenberger, tell me that.
No, I think that was from before. I wasn't aware that it would require me to put it
I
down.
will help you lower that down.
Thank you.
Michelle Randall, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the same question or a similar question to the couple earlier. We have an older gentleman in our delegation who doesn't personally have internet at home, and we may be able to like meet up and share a device, or I have 2 devices, but I don't know if the quality on like a Chromebook is as good. So I would like us to consider that, and I think that we're probably only one of us going to want to make a motion at a time. So
it is going to be, so the anticipation right now is that we're going to let, we're going to follow the bylaws as closely as possible because we don't have the opportunity to change them until we are actually in convention. So state delegations are going to report back the votes of their state delegation, and they're able to report back those votes in whatever way they choose. So that could be a Zoom breakout meeting in which they ask everyone the votes. It can be OPA vote by email. It can be like Arizona. The last time I participated as an Arizona delegate, we had a text message system that was set up. It can be 10 of y'all up in a room, and you know, you can be physically together and then submit the delegation's ballots. So voting is pretty, it's whatever the state wants to do. And the National Party will attempt to facilitate that to the extent we can, but we're not going to dictate that to anyone because that's outside of our purview. Does that make sense?
okay, thank you so much. Yes.
All right. I'm going to recognize Will McVeigh, and then Mary Pat McVeigh is on deck, both of whom need to be sent to credentials soon. Go ahead, Mr. McVeigh.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say. I'm not trying to be difficult or anything, but I did sign in on 2 different devices just to see how that would go. I signed out on my other one since we're having participant issues, and hopefully that will contribute to a solution there, but I need to be recredentialed. That's why I had my hand up.
Thank you, Mr. McVeigh. I'm going to lower your hand, but Mr. Fishman will send you to the credentials room. Mr. Fishman,
yes,
did you verify,
I don't know why we're at
cap?
the 100 limit. I do not know why we're at the 100 cap, but I mean, it's clear that we are. Well, except that we have all these people in these breakout rooms. Let me close all the rooms real quick. I'm going to bring everybody back up to the top level for a second. Hang
Try
on.
it. See what happens.
Yep.
Be at ease, everyone. Mr. Fishman's going to go crazy here.
Yep.
Does it show in the settings that you have it set for a very large meeting?
It doesn't, it's never shown that. So once we upgraded to 1,000, we were good to go. I don't know what the difference is.
And while you were off the call, Mr. Perry said that New Hampshire had this problem and they were able to fix it without having to shut the meeting down. But he didn't say how they did it, just that they were able to do it.
All right, so we now should have everybody back in.
I am right at 100 even.
Right. And I don't know what's happening in the
I
other
think there
room.
is definitely a cap here and we need to fix that.
Yep. I can send out for sure. I mean, let me take a look at a new meeting and just see. There's nothing in here that would say I was going to change it to a very large.
Recognize people while you're
Yep.
troubleshooting.
Yep.
Ms. McVeigh, Mary Pat McVeigh, go ahead.
I was just going to say I've been here for almost a half hour and I haven't been credentialed, verified yet. And also, can you tell me why my participant list only lets me see about 15 people? Maybe 20?
Why you can only see 15 people, I don't understand. I can see 100.
I can't scroll down past about 20 people maybe. And
that may be a software issue. I know Zoom did release another update. We will push you into the credentials room as quickly as we can. Texas delegate Whitney Billieu, go ahead.
Yeah, it was mentioned previously that the different delegations or regions could have breakout rooms assigned through this system. And then you mentioned that there's the meeting format and then there's the webinar format, I guess. Yeah. So which of those would offer that option to those of us who are ultimately going to wind up being delegation chairs or needing to manage a region? Would that apply to both of those formats? And if so, when would we be able to get those rooms set up?
Okay, so breakout rooms are only available in meeting format. So if we do webinar format, breakout rooms are not available. There's a few different options that we're thinking about, but we're not really there yet. One of them is, I know at least one of the states has a 500 participant large meeting Zoom account that they've gotten for other reasons related to their state convention. And we may be able to let people go from the webinar for the main national convention into their Zoom account to do a breakout to do voting and then come back after they filled out their ballot, if they didn't want to use something like an OPA vote or a Slack channel or some other system to do the voting for the state delegation. But in the webinar format, we cannot do breakout rooms. There's a one-to-many format, which is webinar, and then there's the participatory format, which is meeting. And it's a Zoom technical thing where you can't have more than 1,000 people in that meeting format. It's just not possible. Also, I believe, this one I have to double check, Dan has it on his punch list for the next time he meets with the Zoom people. I believe there is a cap on 500 people in a breakout room, although I don't think that's a problem we're gonna hit, right? Because we have no delegation that's over, what, 100 and something? 100-ish. But you can't break out more than 500 people at a time.
I mean, the Texas delegation could potentially have 150 people.
Right, but you're not going to go over 500.
No. So I guess my question is, if there's someone in our delegation who has an account that we can use where there's an option for us to move away from the convention meeting into this separate space where we vote, deliberate, whatever we're going to do, that's outside of the format that the LP is using in that moment. Is there any reason why we can't do that as an option? I mean, is that allowed, or would we have to get that approved? Or
I think, oh no, the idea is we're going to follow basically the normal bylaws and convention rules, which is a state delegation, and the state delegation chair gets to determine how they do voting. And it can be anything they want. It can be the California conga line, it can be the Arizona text messages, It can be y'all getting into your own Zoom meeting and then coming back. You can run a Slack channel. You can call people. I've heard some people suggest smoke signals. I think they were joking, but if they really want to do it, I'm not going to stop them. The whole idea is what we're gonna have state delegation ballots in the same way we would have in the paper form, although we would probably do them through something like a Google Sheet, so that a state delegation chair can fill out the ballot with how their delegation voted on an election. They can screen share it so their delegation can see what they're submitting, and then that will be sent to the secretary. And how you get to the point where as a delegation chair you're filling out that ballot is between you and the rest of your state delegation. It is not a thing that a national party is going to control, because it's not our business, honestly. You know, we'll have OPA vote tested and set up and available for state delegations that want to use that have good email addresses and people that are responsive. But we're not going to tell you to do that. If you all want to get into a breakout room and just, you know, or your own Zoom connection and just ask people what they want, that's fine too. It looks like the participant cap has been fixed since we're definitely well
so
over 100.
our
seeing
separate
people jack into the waiting room.
Yes, I found the right hammer.
Thank you. Ms. Bill, you keep going.
So just to be clear, I just want to make sure that if we're going to do our own separate, so if we're going to do our own, if we're going to do our own separate breakout room, it doesn't have to be through the main convention online system. We can do it however we want.
It does not. You can.
And there must be a lag here. Okay. Okay, thank you.
There is quite a bit of lag. Thank you. I have Alaska delegate Joshua McHose, and then Hawaii delegate Craig DaCosta is on deck. Alaska delegate Mr. McHose. Go ahead.
Hey Dan, I just sent you a message. You already fixed it, so the little problem's already there. It's gone. I just realized that we fixed the participant issue.
Thank you, Mr. McHose. All right, Hawaii delegate Craig DaCosta, go ahead. And then California delegate McCardle is on deck. Mr. DaCosta, go ahead.
I cannot unmute myself.
Go ahead, Mr. DaCosta.
Can you hear me?
You are now unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay. So
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So for Ms. McVeigh's question, we can only see 25 people at a time, but if you move your cursor to the right end of the screen, you can page and see the rest of the participants.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. DaCosta. California delegate Angela McCardle, you are next. And then Tyler Rowe is on deck and will need to be credentialed, but go ahead, Ms. McCardle.
Thank you. Can you confirm how people who want to be in the room during business but are not delegates will be able to sort of be in the room metaphorically with us?
On the YouTube
I can't confirm it exactly. With the 1,000-person Zoom cap, what will probably happen is people who are not able to be delegates will need to be outside the room. I'm not really clear on it, and it's going to depend on how many people really want to participate. We had anticipated potentially having an alternate room where alternates could be, and then like a bullpen, they could be called into the main room. That 1,000-person hard cap on meeting configuration has been kind of an issue. It's not an issue for voting if we do it in webinar configuration, because in webinar configuration, we have up to 3,000 participants. We can have alternates in there, and webinar is its whole different thing, but it is not conducive to deliberative business. So If the delegates choose to do platform or bylaws, we can't do it in a way that everybody gets to be in the same room at the same time. It's just not feasible. Now, I anticipate that the number of delegates who would want to do deliberative business is going to be under the 1,000-person cap, but alternates would essentially have to be outside the room watching the live stream. And then when a delegation chair indicated that their delegation was not full, they would request that an alternate be allowed to enter in. We'd let them in through the waiting room, credential them, and get them into the room as necessary. Does that answer your question, Ms. McCardle?
I think so. So potentially watching on the YouTube live stream and potentially dealing with like a waiting room backstage area.
Something like that, so that you would be able to see what was happening, but not participate unless you're a credentialed delegate who is eligible to vote at the time.
Thank you.
I have Tyler, thank you. I have Tyler Rowe on deck, and then Arkansas delegate Michael Kalagius on deck after that. So, Mr.
And then, Mr.
Rowe,
Chair, I have a quick announcement.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Fishman, go ahead first.
People who have not been credentialed yet, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a thing that says breakout room, and I'm getting to you all as fast as I can. And if you click on that, it will take you into a breakout room where 2 people are busy credentialing as fast as possible.
Mr. Rowe, go ahead, and then Mr. Kalagius, you are on deck. Mr. Rowe.
Tyler Rowe, main delegate. I don't see that breakout room area that Mr. Fishman just talked about.
Blow your window up full screen. Starting from the bottom left, you'll see mute, stop video, keep going across the screen. You'll see something that says breakout rooms.
Not showing up on my screen. I'm using the app in Windows.
So can you tell me what it says going left to right from mute?
Left to right, mute, start video, participants, share screen, record reactions, leave meeting.
See the breakout room list at all.
That's correct.
Sorry, who is this? Which delegate?
Tyler Rowe, main delegate.
All right, let me find you, Tyler. It may be that I haven't had a chance to assign you yet.
And will our aliases be assigned?
So what do you see now, Tyler? Do you see it now? Mr. Rowe? Oh, not only did he see it, I moved him in there.
All right,
okay. So I'm going after
Star
Mary
Wars
Pat
would
next.
Also like to be assigned as well. Mr. Kalagius, go ahead. And then
I had a question. I missed, I guess, a little bit of the discussion earlier. When you were talking about states kind of could do their own thing and then report that in. And I was just kind of, so if we get together, say in Arkansas, and we get all of our delegates to physically congregate in one place, then we can do our voting kind of in person there, and just our delegate chair would then send in all of our votes for any motions that were being made or for president or vice president. I'm understanding that correctly,
or vice president or any officers. So the elections are done by ballot. And the way that our bylaws and convention rules work is a balloted election. The state delegation chair submits a ballot that shows the totals for the delegation for any candidates. Those can be done however the state chooses to do them. The only thing that requires individual participation is deliberative business, where it's the yays and the nays on a motion that's under debate. That's where you would have yays and nays from individual people. That's where it would be an issue, where if you had 10 people who are all logged in on the same Zoom account, I can't really give you a times 10 for yes or no, or like even it out or anything like that. So for the actual voting on elections, we can do that in webinar format, and the states can determine how they do the vote. For deliberative business, we are at that 1,000-person cap. Does that make sense?
Okay, so for deliberative business, everybody needs their own connection that they can do through this or whatever we're doing. But for president, vice president, officers,
rotate through.
Okay, because I'm just wondering if we try and get together, we're going to need something that has. Well, I'm just trying to make sure. So, are we going to have to find a room that has enough broadband Wi-Fi for every delegate to be able to stream individually, or not necessarily?
That would be the best thing to do, but everybody's we're all learning together. I'm going to go next to Mr. Newman, Carl Newman, and then on deck is California Delegate Alicia Matson.
Hello, Nick. This is Carl Newman, one of the alternates for New Hampshire. And I guess my main question is, do we all need the individual Zoom links if we're going to meet up in person, as the New Hampshire delegation has been discussing?
So as I mentioned before to some other people, for deliberative business, it's better to be logged in on your own account, because then you can raise your own hand and be recognized as an individual. For election business, you could be in the same place and your delegation chair can submit all the elections together.
And then I guess my question for Mr. Fishman is in the mobile app, I do not see the breakout rooms, as I know other people were not seeing it in desktop apps.
We will work on that, Mr. Newman.
Thank you,
California
Mr.
Delegate, you're welcome, Mr. Newman. California Delegate Alicia Matson, and then I have Sean Cahill on deck. Go ahead, Ms. Matson.
Earlier, the chair was saying that each delegation, it was up to each delegation how they wish to conduct their vote, and they could do it any way they want. But I think we're forgetting Convention Rule 10, which requires, I'll just read, for each vote in which subtotals are submitted by delegation, each delegation shall conduct its vote by written ballot after each delegation has tabulated its own vote totals before submitting totals to the secretary. Tellers approved by the secretary shall review the ballot tabulation for accuracy and co-sign the delegation totals. And there's more that I won't read, but you know, the reason that this rule was added is because over time, it's been demonstrated that there are a lot of tabulation errors at the delegation level. And without this double check, there's a lot of errors that go through. And I don't know how this is going to be addressed in this format.
I don't know either, but we'll do our best. Sean Cahill, you're next, and then Sean Lawoma is on deck. Mr. Cahill, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. In the previous test trial run, we were automatically placed into the breakout room as soon as we arrived. Like many other people, I do not have that option to head there myself. And I would simply request that if possible, anybody who doesn't have the state and delegate or alternate indicator in front of their name has clearly not been credentialed yet. Maybe we could just move all of those people to the breakout room preemptively.
We're working on that as quickly as we can, Mr. Cahill. There's a lot of people coming
including
in.
my
Yes, including yourself, Mr. Luoma, and then Texas Delegate Whitney Billieu is on deck. Mr. Luoma, go ahead.
Thank you, Nick. I have my hand raised because I want to be credentialed. And I know that I'm on Android, I cannot find where a breakout room is.
We will try and help you with that.
And Sean definitely explained it. If you don't have your state in front of your name. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Billieu, go ahead. And then Mr. Kemp is on deck.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify in one of the answers that you were providing to a participant earlier on, you mentioned that balloting and voting would include LNC elections, officer elections, and things like that. And I want to make it very clear that those elections are not slated for this online event. So let's make sure everybody understands that we are only doing the president and vice presidential nominations via online methods, according to the LNC's decision the other day. So
yes, the LNC's call of the convention was for president and vice president only. The adoption of the agenda is the first item on the agenda after the credentials report for the delegation when they convene on May 22nd. And it is up to them what agenda they adopt. What I was attempting to explain is that for elections, we will use the webinar format so that we're sure to be able to allow up to the full 1,046 delegations. And for non-election business, we will use the meeting format, and that may require us to log in and log out of a different meeting with a different configuration. That's all I was trying to explain. I'm not trying to tell the delegates what they should adopt for their agenda. That's up to the delegates. I intend to present the agenda that the LNC has presented based on the last meeting at the outset of the convention. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Bilyeu. Mr. Albea, you are next, and then Mr. Albea is sharing a screen. Mr. Albea, is there a reason you're sharing your screen, Mr. Albea? You are unmuted. You can tell me why you're sharing your screen. Or we can, oh, bye-bye.
I shut down the screen share.
All right, thank you. Chris Kemp is up, and then Illinois Delegate Bob Blair Smith II is on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Kemp.
Thank you, Nick. My issue has been explained. I was just waiting on credentials and some breakout room assignments. Sounds like I just need to be more patient.
We're going to work on that as quickly as we can. Illinois Delegate Bob Blair Smith, and then Justin O'Donnell is on deck.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
Wonderful.
Off deck, and Mr. Craig is on deck.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, so I was among those that were able to get back in after Mr. Fishman opened the vault. So thank you, Dan, for doing that. I also wanted to point out for those that were talking about the credentialed versus the non-credentialed delegates that as I entered the room and put the meeting number in, I also preceded my name. I filled in the field before my name with ILD. So if I still need to be credentialed, I wanted to point out that because I was able to do that, it's potentially possible that anybody could do that. In case there was a question about a user's ability to manually do that as they enter the room.
If I could speak
for tonight's meeting, we're not letting that be a problem. Is that right, Dan?
That's 100% correct. Right now, if I can see my screen, security, ease of use are on a balance. The more security you have, the less ease of use. The more ease of use, the less security. Right now, we're going more for ease of use, and we're doing mock security. When we do it for real, we will lock down. You will not be able to change your name or prefix your name. And in fact, we will assign your name and it will be unchangeable. To that end, Mr. Chair, I would like to bring in the rest of the people who are waiting in the credentials room. As we're 30 minutes into the room, we have figured out what the problem was. Next time we will have a full team of 6 people credentialing at a time. Right now we're limited to just 1. So I will bring.
Are we going to keep rotating people, or are you bringing everyone back?
I will bring everybody back into the main room at this point.
And we're not credentialing people? You're going to be done with it?
I
let
would
it go for this time?
I would let it go for this time because the people who have volunteered to credential this time are not actually on the credentialing committee. And I told them that at 8:30 I figured we would be done because we'd have 6
Fair
rooms.
enough. We will then move quickly to actually doing
At one more point.
Of deliberative business. Yes, Mr. Blair Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. Since I'm the only credentialed Illinois delegate on the call at this moment, I did want to speak on behalf of Mr. Cunningham from Illinois. He mentioned that the registration deadline passed just an hour and a half ago. He was unable to pre-register. And as I understand, there's 2 additional Zoom, we'll call it trial sessions, that the registration be extended for those sessions or new registration deadlines be sent as soon as possible.
Registration is not even open for those sessions yet.
Understood. Okay, so the registration was
from those rooms, from this room.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. I'll let him know.
Yep.
All right. Mr. Fishman's going to let everybody back in the room. I'm going to next recognize California Delegate Andy Craig and then Nathan Moxley. is on deck. So Mr. Craig, go ahead. And you should be able to unmute yourself.
Oh, there we
you
go. I've been unmuted now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to a point of information. Have we? I might have missed it in the initial problems with the cap on who could get in. But have you actually gavelled us in yet? And second suggestion I would just make for everybody is you don't have to use video. I'm sure some people have noticed the video is kind of slow and clunky. We can save bandwidth by, unless you're actually presenting or whatever, you can just turn your video off and follow along with audio. So that was one suggestion I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. We, I think, have everyone in now. I'm going to next recognize Mr. Moxley, and then I will entertain a motion purporting hot dog to be a sandwich. Mr. Moxley, go ahead. And Mr. Moxley, where are you from, and are you a delegate or an alternate? Go ahead, Mr. Moxley. Nathan Moxley. Mr. Moxley, you are unmuted and I cannot hear you. Mr. Moxley, last chance. And Mr. Moxley is now out of the queue. Connecticut Delegate Howard Grayson.
Hi.
And then Mr. Valente is on deck.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I am credentialed. I was able to kind of go through the process and got credentialed. Quite interesting little trial and error, but it's interesting times for all of us. So I just want to say that I was here, and thanks for sponsoring this.
You're very welcome, Mr. Grayson. Thank you. West Virginia Delegate David Valente, and then Michael Rufo is on deck.
Hey, just one question about the voting. Is there some kind of audit trail that we're going to have to preserve to send to LNC, or how's that going to work?
I think it's going to work similar to how it works normally. In a normal convention, you either keep your ballots or you do something else to keep track of why people voted how they voted. You'll have to figure out how to do that with an electronic meeting. Good luck. Michael Rufo, and then New Hampshire Delegate Darryl Perry is on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Rufo.
There we go. It wouldn't let me unmute. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I heard a couple of questions about people gathering in the same room and using one computer to log into the meeting. How can we do that without them being, wouldn't they not get credentialed then? Doesn't everybody have to be in the same place, and wouldn't they have to be in the same room? And then wouldn't that create, I mean, if that's the case, doesn't that create another conflict by calling this a place based on the ruling of the LNC on Saturday?
I don't know all those answers, but Mr. Rufo, are you a New Jersey delegate? Is that right? Yes, New Jersey delegate. Let me just fix that for you right now myself. We're going to do the best we can is basically the answer. So I think we're going to try and keep track of people. New Hampshire delegate Darryl Perry, and then New York delegate Thomas Quitter or Quiter.
Mr. Chair, request for information. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
I don't know. I think that that's going to be a point of debate tonight, Mr. Perry. You'll lower your hand now. Mr. Quitter? Let me make sure you're unmuted. Go ahead and speak.
It's Thomas Quiter. Always Quiter, never quitter, rarely quieter. A couple of things about your audio issues. If you look down at the mute button, there's an up arrow. You click that. If you have multiple sound devices or multiple microphones, multiple devices with a microphone, you can choose that depending. The other thing is if someone having an audio issue has had a program that uses their microphone open, and it's still running in the background, you can still be hijacking that microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Quieter.
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 Yeah, think French. It actually means too free.
Very good. Nathan Moxley, you are up, and then Stephen Babka. Where are you from, and are you a delegate or are you an alternate? Go ahead, Mr. Moxley. Yeah, you are.
Hear me this time.
I can hear you.
All right. I apologize for the microphone issues last time. I am from Texas. We have not decided if I'm a delegate or an alternate yet. And I just wanted
to delegate then.
Sounds great. I just wanted to point out that I was credentialed earlier and I was on a laptop that's battery died. And when I logged back in, I lost my credentials. Is that something that's going to be a possibility during the actual online convention, or is that something that'll be addressed later?
Probably that will be a possibility during the online convention because we can only credential an account as they come in. So if you pop out and pop back in, we have to credential the new account that authenticates.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Babka, and then Massachusetts delegate Michael Eisenberg is on deck.
Yeah, I apologize that this was covered and I missed it, but I was in a credentialing room and then I and everyone else in it got kicked out. So I'm actually not credentialed right now.
Are you Pennsylvania or are you Ohio?
I am from Ohio, an alternate.
An Ohio alternate, Mr. Babka. We will make that happen for you.
Thank you.
Massachusetts delegate Michael Eisenberg, go ahead.
Nick, I'll take over the renaming.
There we go. Yes, I'm a little confused about credentialing. I don't know if I was credentialed tonight, and I don't know if it matters. Will we be re-credentialed again on the actual event?
We will be re-credentialed on the actual event, and it will be a lot more secure than it is tonight. This is basically a test. We're just running things through, doing some practice. It's not super secure. For those states that have not chosen their delegates yet, we're letting them participate. We're going to just say that they're delegates or alternates. It's not a big deal. But yes, on the actual online convention that we have, we will be more careful about the credentialing.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to recognize Tim Giblin next, and then Mr. Thrasher after that.
I do apologize. Actually, I had an issue where I was booted off and then brought back in, needed to be re-credentialed, but answered it last time.
All right, Mr. Giblin, where are you from, and are you a delegate or an alternate? Sorry, I can't hear you. Let me just unmute you. Go ahead, try again. Mr. Giblin, go ahead. Why is
You have to unmute yourself, Mr. Giblin.
Oh, sorry. I'm doing my best.
There you go.
Do it with me. All right.
Delegate from
Where are you
Kansas.
from? Kansas delegate?
Yes.
All right, you're set. Delaware delegate McVeigh, and then Mr. Christopher Thrasher.
I have a point of order and then a point of information. My point of order is that I had a point of information and it was a privileged motion and I was not able to get to the front of the line in any way, shape, or form. And my point of information is, how would I get to the front of the line if I have a privileged motion?
It's tricky. I don't have a great answer for you, and we're going to have to figure that out. What we thought about is there are a couple of interesting little icons that are available, like, dislike, need a break, or whatever. And we may be able to use something to get attention for a privileged motion. Mr. Fishman is messing around with the yes button and blinking at me, which I find exceedingly annoying, which is not
I guess that's a good thing. It should be annoying because it's privileged. We should be able to annoy you.
Yeah, no, privileged motions do annoy me. So So we're going to figure that out. We're working on it. Mr. Thrasher is next, and then New York Delegate Deborah Law is on deck. Mr. Thrasher, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate from
Mr.
Illinois.
Thrasher, Delegate from Illinois, thank you. I'll fix your name while you're talking. Go ahead.
Thank you. Is the current plan, does that include sending out documentation of how to, once we get all the bugs figured out before the convention, or is that, I know staff has a tremendous amount of work on their plate at the moment, but I do feel like that's going to be something that would be necessary.
We're going to do our best to get there. That's why we're doing so many practice sessions this week, a week in advance of the actual convention.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
New York Delegate Deborah Law, and then Brandon Lyon, you are on deck. Ms. Law, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. You may have spoke about this earlier. I may just not have been participating at that time. I had trouble getting in. Anyways, how many people do you anticipate might be joining the Zoom meeting for the convention? And as a delegate, will I be able, once credentialed, to get into the room, bypassing, say, just, anybody else that might be interested in logging in?
Yes, so we anticipate that we can have up to 1,000 people participating in the Zoom meeting in meeting format, which is the deliberative format. We will only be letting credentialed delegates in anyone that we're doing format. Anyone else that is an alternate, a member of media, an observer, will need to be watching on the stream. During the actual voting for any elections that we have, we anticipate doing a webinar format, which allows up to 3,000 participants, so we can have more than the number of people who vote participate in the software, and then the state delegation chairs will determine who gets to vote.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Law?
Yes, it does. Very well. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Brandon Lyon, you are up, and then Mr. Brackeen from Ohio, an alternate, is up on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Lyon.
Okay, well, I was just, again, I was one of those people that was kicked out of the credentialing room.
Where are you from? And are you a delegate or alternate?
I'm a New York alternate.
Fixed. Anything else?
Actually, Mr. Thrasher had almost the exact same question I was going to ask about.
Perfect. Ohio alternate William Brackeen, go ahead, and then Dana Carver, you are on deck.
Hello. I would just like to kind of point out that everybody's having little technical issues here and there. It's probably a good idea and not necessary for everyone to apologize for each individual thing that happens. People are going to be muted when they're supposed to be talking. People are going to be unmuted when they're not supposed to be talking. We know these are going to happen, and it will make things go quicker if we aren't spending a lot of time apologizing for things.
Appreciate that. Dana Carver, you're up, and Ohio Delegate Daniel Faust, you are on deck. And Dana Carver, where are you from? And are you a delegate or an alternate? What was that?
Michigan delegate.
Gotcha. What did you want to be recognized for? Just to be that or anything else?
Yep, just to get that done.
You're all done. Thank you much. Ohio Delegate Daniel Faust, and then Juanita Billings, you are next. Mr. Faust, go ahead. Oh, sorry, I got to unmute you. Go ahead, Mr. Faust. You should be able to unmute yourself now. There you are.
Okay, well, yeah, now that works. So you've brought up a couple times now that obviously the panelist format is not functional for a deliberative process. Then it raises the concern that if there's a hard limit of 1,000 people for this format, that you cannot even get just the seated delegates in participating. Is that correct?
So if there is a 1,000-person limit for the meeting format, that is 40 less the maximum potential delegates for the national convention.
Okay, just wanted to have confirmed that that was the case, that we could have the number of seated delegates participate. Thank you.
You're welcome. Virginia delegate Juanita Billings, you are up. And then Georgia delegate Eric Fontaine, you are on deck.
Thank you. This is Juanita. I was just asking where my VAD was in front of my name, and it magically appeared as soon as I raised my hand. So
We're fancy people here.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Georgia delegate Eric Fontaine, you are up. And Illinois delegate Bob Blair Smith II, you are on deck.
Hi, I just got kicked out of the breakout, the credentialing room. Just need to be credentialed from Georgia. That's it.
Looks like we got you taken care of, Mr. Fontaine, so you are good. Mr. Blair Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. My comment is just a point of, I'm going to call it a best practice for the Zoom medium. And it's something that some of us may be used to because we're doing it for our day jobs. But one of the things that can be distracting for participants and speakers is gallery view. While the Hollywood Squares looks cool, it's not great for folks that might have limited attention span. The second point is that for the presenters to control that risk of distraction, sharing a presentation, a document, an agenda would be something that might mitigate that as far as controlling the dialogue, making sure that folks are on task and on topic when speaking to a point of order, a document, a vote. Just a thought that might have helped with the long sessions from over the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blair Smith. Arizona delegate David Howman, you're up. And then Tennessee delegate Marcus Baker, you are on.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a suggestion regarding the credentialing portion to make sure for future tests that we are careful with the setting to make sure that there's not a limit of how long we're in there, because I was also one of the people that it got shut down and kicked out. So if we're able to have just one session for credentialing, that might make it easier to get that all done in one session.
Appreciate that feedback. Mr. Baker, you are up. Go ahead, Mr. Baker, sorry.
My question was about credentialing. I just wanted to make sure that I was credentialed. Apparently I am, since you did recognize me as the delegate from Tennessee.
Thank you. Maryland delegate Stuart Sims, oh, you went away. And then Florida delegate Omar Requero, you are on deck. Mr. Sims, did you have anything? All right, Mr. Requero, go ahead. And then Kansas delegate Ned Kelly, you are on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me go?
I can hear you.
I have two questions. The first is, what are the orders of the day? And the second is, I have a gentleman from my delegation. His name is Lee Corser. He's been having a hard time trying to get in. And really, my delegation is talking to each other on Facebook right now, and we're having some issues. But he's on an iPad, and I don't know if that's an issue. So maybe it's something that we could look into. I'm not asking for an answer right now.
The orders of the day, we are going to debate the issue of hot dogs being sandwiches at some point. I will entertain that motion at any point. No one has yet made it. That's pretty much the orders of the day for tonight. We'll probably go for about another hour. Mr. Aguero, I'm going to lower your hand now. Move to Kansas delegate Ned Kelly, and then Kansas delegate Mary Girl. You are on deck. Mr.
Oh,
Kelly,
wow.
go ahead.
Well, first I have a point of information. There's a lot of feedback. Maybe there's a lot of mics that aren't muted at the moment.
There should not be too many of them, but there's definitely one that's bothering the hell out of me.
Yeah, I'm hearing that too. That wasn't my point. My point is actually a suggestion. Couldn't we find a way to let each of those doubles, it would be a maximum of 40 people who would need to double up and kind of share on somebody else's Zoom account. As long as the delegation chairs, of which I am one, are aware of all those, they should be able to, you should be able to look at your screen and get the official Zoom results on any particular vote, and then just add on or subtract some yays or nays. Since it's only up to a maximum of 40, I would think technically that shouldn't be too difficult.
We may be able to do that. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll do our best. Kansas delegate Mary Geralt, and then Mike Dooling, you are on deck.
Yes, I just wanted clarification. Whenever we enter the Zoom meeting, will we automatically be in a credentialing room, or somebody will find us and move us to a credentialing room, or how will that work?
It's not entirely clear. When you enter the meeting, you by default go into the waiting room. Right now, the waiting room just goes straight to the main room, but we maybe figure out a way to make that go into a credentialing room first.
Okay, perfect.
Mike Dooling, you are up, and then Mississippi delegate Vicki Rose is on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Dooling.
I'm on deck. Mike Dooling, Texas delegate. I skipped the waiting room. I skipped the credentialing room because I can do what I want. Thank you. Mike Dooling from Texas, delegate.
You're set. All right, Mississippi delegate Vicki Rose, Ohio delegate Jim Cavoli on deck. Ms. Rose, go ahead.
There we go. Hi, thanks, Vicki from Mississippi delegate. And I'm wondering if Zoom is the platform you are set on using, because Microsoft Teams seems to be a better workaround and option where you can set up chat rooms for each individual state. You can share files, and it's a lot more robust than Zoom is. And even with the alternates and whatnot, you can set up an entire room for alternates and move people in and out a lot better. The credentialing issues will work more seamlessly than with what you have with Zoom. My husband is a Microsoft partner, and he can talk to anybody at National if they need some information on Teams.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. I don't know whether or not we're going to be able to switch something within less than 2 weeks from when we're trying to make this happen, but I do appreciate the feedback. Ohio delegate Jim Cavoli, and then New Jersey delegate Nikhil Suresh Kumar is on deck. Mr. Cavoli, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find it high time that we move to something of a bit more substance, invoking the rules and such. I move that it be resolved by this body that, in accordance with the cube rule, that a hot dog is not a sandwich and further is in fact a taco.
All right. It's been moved by Mr. Cavoli from Ohio that a hot dog is not a sandwich. I assume that there will be a second for that. If you want to second that, please indicate the yes button. Yep, I see quite a few seconds pop up for that. So the motion has been made by Mr. Cavoli that a hot dog is not a sandwich. Mr. Cavoli, you have been moved and seconded. You may speak to your motion. A hot dog is not a sandwich and is in fact a taco. Go ahead. Mr. Cavoli, are you still able to speak? And if you are not, I will try and fix that. You are an Ohio delegate, correct? All right, go ahead, Mr. Cavoli, you are unmuted.
Yes, I am, from the various visual cues, an Ohio delegate. The matter at hand has been argued many times over, but my position here stating that a hot dog is in fact not a sandwich, but further in fact a taco, is based upon the cube rule, cuberule.com, of food identification very clearly lays out a strong standard for identifying and classifying foods based on the presence and arrangement of their structural starches. This strikes me as a very reasoned way to identify the foods, very defensible and also logically sound. Therefore, it is one of the best rules that we can apply when deciding whether a hot dog is in fact a sandwich and one that we ought to take up.
All right, we are next going to move. The next person on deck is Nevada Delegate Bruce Newman. You are recognized, Mr. Newman. Mr. Wendt is on deck after Mr. Newman. Mr. Newman, go ahead.
I had actually only raised my hand to get my NVD because I felt a little bit on the naked side. But I think it is quite obvious that a hot dog is a sandwich, as it is meat surrounded by bread. In that case, I also agree that a taco is a sandwich, while a pizza is not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Mr. Wendt, you are next. Nebraska Delegate Mr. Harold is on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Wendt.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, Mr. Wendt, go ahead.
I withdraw my question. Thank you.
That was pretty awesome. Mr. Harold, go ahead, and Mr. Zimmerman, you are on deck. Mr. Harold, are you able to speak?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise to support the motion that a hot dog is not a sandwich. Webster's defines a sandwich as 2 slices of bread with any sort of food between, anything in like arrangement. A hot dog bun is not 2 slices of bread. In fact, according to the book, How the Hot Dog Found Its Bun, the original idea was to make sandwiches and sell sandwiches. However, putting a wiener in between 2 buns or in 2 pieces of bread was never intended to work well. So what they did was they took a roll and they split it in half and put the wiener in between those 2 halves of the roll. It is not bread. And then further, I would say, and I would argue, Mr. Chairman, that we have different variations of hot dogs, including the cocktail weenie, sometimes referred to as little smokies, and they can be wrapped in crescent rolls and served on a toothpick, and it is quite delightful. And that would not be classified as a sandwich. And I believe that that is according to Robert's Rules of Hors d'oeuvres.
Point is well taken, Mr. Harold. Thank you. We will move to Nebraska Delegate Scott Zimmerman. Delaware Delegate Will McVeigh is on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Zimmerman. Mr. Zimmerman, I think you are unmuted, but let's make sure. Go ahead, Mr. Zimmerman. And then Mr.
I am now unmuted. I am now unmuted. Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chairman. I would like to bring up a point of information that a hot dog alone does not qualify as a sandwich because a hot dog alone is just a piece of tube meat. Once placed in a bun or a split roll, then the definition of the hot dog then becomes a hot dog sandwich. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McVeigh. Go ahead.
So I would like to thank the esteemed delegate from Nebraska, Mr. Harold, for his comments regarding a sandwich being between 2 slices of bread. However, I would point out that a burger is commonly considered to be a sandwich. However, it is not between 2 slices of bread. It is between 2 pieces of bread. So I think that the definition using slices is overly narrow. Accordingly, I believe that a hot dog is both a taco and a sandwich. Therefore, I would like to amend the motion saying as much, that a hot dog is both a taco and a sandwich. Thank you.
If there is a second for Mr. McVeigh's amendment to the motion indicating that the hot dog is both taco and a sandwich, please indicate by raising your yes. I do see a second to that, Mr. McVeigh. So the current amendment on the floor is that a hot dog is both a taco and a sandwich, which amends the original motion. We're going to move to Washington Delegate Elliot Jaksch, and then Ohio alternate Stephen Babka is on deck.
Mr. Chair, I would like to amend this amendment to replace any reference of hot dog to Pop-Tart instead.
I believe that we can amend the amendment. We have a main motion. We have an amendment to the motion. This would be amendment to the amendment. Is there a second for the amendment to the amendment? I would like to see a yes. I see one. Mr. Jaksch, you are amending the amendment to indicate that a taco is in fact a Pop-Tart. Is that correct? Let me unmute you so that you can say, I want to make sure I understand it. Go ahead.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. I would like to amend the amendment to say Pop-Tart instead of hot dog anywhere that hot dog is referenced. Thank you.
All right. So anywhere that hot dog has been referenced, Pop-Tart will be replaced if your amendment to the amendment does pass. Ohio alternate Stephen Babka, you are up, and then New Hampshire delegate Darryl Perry, you are on deck.
Yes, request for information. Is it in order to call the question at this time?
Or move the previous question. At this time, if you move the previous question, you'll be moving the question of whether or not the amendment to the amendment replacing instances of taco with Pop-Tart were to be adopted. If there is not objection, we can move to that motion for the previous question. This is where it gets tricky with Zoom, because there are a lot of people who have their hands raised to be recognized, who are attempting to move the previous question. If Mr. Fishman's able to do a poll, that would make this easier.
What would you like the poll to say?
I would like the poll to say, shall we move to a vote on the amendment to the amendment? Yes or no are the two options. That way everyone can keep their place in line with their hands. So Mr. Babka has moved that we move the previous question. Mr. Fishman will submit a poll to the participants.
The poll is now up.
You will either say yes or no as far as moving to a vote on the amendment to the amendment.
And I included abstain.
Thank you for including abstain. You're very kind. We'll let that go for about 30 seconds. It is very clear about 25 seconds in which way this is going to go, but we'll go to 30. At 30 seconds, I have 160 yes, 38 no, and 16 abstain.
I will publish the results.
To a vote. So we will now move to a vote on the amendment to the amendment, which would replace all instances of taco, of hot dog, Pop-Tart. Hot dog with Pop-Tart. I've been advised by my parliamentarian in the room, the better server. So all in favor of replacing hot dog with Pop-Tart. Mr. Fishman, can you do a poll on that? Yes and no on hot dog and Pop-Tart?
We will leave voting open for 30 seconds. 5 seconds left. Get your votes in. The amendment fails. I'm going to wait until the chair returns, though, unless Alex Merced is in here, in which case I'm going to hand him the gavel.
With the amendment failing, we'll return back to the debate. I believe New Hampshire Delegate Perry was on deck. Mr. Perry, you are recognized.
Yes, I would like to actually speak against the motion and say that a hot dog is not a sandwich. Whether or not it's a taco, I do not know. But there was a lawsuit in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts between Panera Bread and Qdoba Mexican Grill, where the Panera Bread was attempting to enforce a no-compete clause in the White City Shopping Center in Shrewsbury. And Panera had argued that burritos were in fact sandwiches. The judge disagreed, citing Cambridge chef Chris Schlesinger, who said, and I quote, "I know of no chef or culinary historian who would call a burrito a sandwich. Indeed, the notion would be absurd to any credible chef or culinary historian," end quote, citing that sandwich requires a topping of some sort between two pieces of bread. A hot dog is stuff inside one piece of bread. A taco would be stuff inside of some form of hardened tortilla in most cases. And also, it could be argued that what Subway sells would not be a sandwich either, but would be some sort of sandwich alternative. And with that, I call all previous questions.
So it's not generally approved of to call previous questions after you've debated. There is also an argument that whatever Subway does is in fact art rather than a sandwich, due to the fact that sandwich artists are involved. Mr. Perry, I'm not going to recognize you for calling all previous questions. I'm going to lower your hand. Recognize Louisiana Delegate Daniel Hayes, followed by Mr. Quiter from New York. Mr. Hayes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, Daniel Hayes from Louisiana. I'd like to move to postpone definitely to July 9th in Orlando at noon. This question, at which point we can sample said sandwiches and other Pop-Tarts, tacos, etc.
Mr. Hayes, if you could remind me if a motion to postpone indefinitely is in fact debatable.
Not indefinitely, postpone definitely. Time
Postpone
certain.
definitely. Sorry, postpone to a time certain. Is it debatable or not? Yeah, I know I have to look too. That's why I was hoping you would check first for me.
Would you like me to unmute Mr. Brown?
You can unmute Mr. Brown if he knows the answer off the top of his head.
I'm pretty sure yes.
Yes, yes, the motion to postpone definitely is debatable.
All right, Mr. Hayes, would you like to speak to your argument for postponing definitely?
Yeah, so we've heard about all kinds of food. I've gotten hungry just listening to it. And I think the only way to truly decide this is to actually sample said food and make the decision after that.
Right. Mr. Quiter, you are up, and then Mr. Valente, you are on deck.
And I think the only way to truly decide this is to actually sample said food.
Sorry, I'm getting some audio feedback.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that encouraging people to eat things like hot dogs in the pandemic when you need your immune system to be fully on par, it's probably bad form. We shouldn't be encouraging people to get sick.
Thank you, Mr. Quiter. Mr.
Quiter.
Valente. Quiter. I apologize. I'll get better over time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm against postponing this motion until the in-person convention, because it's obvious it's not a sandwich. It's a white person taco, and that's how we need to treat it as such. Now you're back.
Thank you, Mr. Valente. Wisconsin delegate Mr. Chianese, followed by Indiana delegate Morgan Rigg. You are on deck.
Yeah, this is Wisconsin delegate. So as all great debates go to, we have to go to the Merriam Dictionary. A bread or a sandwich is 2 or more slices of bread or a split roll having filling in between, or 1 slice of bread covered with food. And bread is usually baked and leavened food made of a mixture whose basic constituent is flour or meal, which means tacos are not leavened, so they don't have bread, not a sandwich, and a hot dog is a sandwich. All I got.
Thank you. Indiana delegate Morgan Rigg, followed by Indiana delegate Russell Brooks Bank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only have one thing to say about the motion regarding the hot dog. It is most certainly a taco. I will explain why. Most people have for years made the wrong assumption that the only appropriate toppings on a hot dog are ketchup and mustard. I know from firsthand experience that that is a load of nonsense. I, in fact, use as toppings for a hot dog such things as onions, shredded cheese, and beef, all of which I can assure you can be found in a taco. So therefore, I believe that a hot dog is a taco, not a sandwich. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Brooksbank, you are next, followed by Nevada delegate Jason Smith on deck.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Brooksbank.
Okay.
I love your background, by the way. I just have to say that.
Say again?
I love your background. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you. It's oh dang it. I'm having a senior moment. I'll remember in a minute.
All good.
It's a hike I took a while back. What are we speaking on now? We're speaking on the motion.
So at this point, we've had a motion about the nature of a hot dog. We had an amendment on that motion. And then we have a motion to postpone that to a time certain, being the in-person convention in Orlando. That is the current question on the floor, is whether or not to postpone this question of hot dogs being tacos or sandwiches to the in-person convention in Orlando.
Okay, may I speak to more than one of those things?
I will let it be germane as long as you don't go a little too wild.
Okay. Well, first off, someone had mentioned that a sandwich is meat surrounded by bread, and I'm going to say that's false, because a corn dog is meat surrounded by bread, and we all know that's meat popsicle. I am not in favor of the amendment, and I'm in favor of the motion because I would like to try various different items to get some more information before I make my vote. And with
Thank
that,
you, Mr. Brooksbank. Nevada delegate Jason Smith, followed by Tennessee delegate Tricia Butler. You are on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I happen to know that there are people doing a drinking game saying, "Can you hear me?" So I'm going to say, "Can you hear me?" just to make sure that these people get loaded. I had a question which was answered by Mr. Darryl Perry, I believe, and I'd like to just go into a little bit of why a taco is clearly a hot dog is not a taco. A taco, by definition, has a tortilla of some sort, typically folded. I'm very familiar with them. I eat them a lot, as well as sandwiches. I'm an equal opportunity consumer. I would like to say with the sandwich, there is a Vietnamese dish called banh mi, which is delightful. It is bread, and many times it is not in 2 pieces, but rather a French roll that is split down the middle and filled. if you can call that a taco, what do you call pork, mushu pork? Because mushu pork is basically a tortilla, an Asian tortilla that is filled with deliciousness. If that's, a sandwich, come on. I mean, we gotta be logical here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Tennessee Delegate Tricia Butler with Ohio Delegate Daniel Faust on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
I can, Ms. Butler. Go ahead.
But can you hear me?
I can totally hear you.
I'd like to submit to the delegation my credentials, my culinary arts diploma, and I would have it be known that on November 6, 2015, the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council announced officially that hot dogs are not sandwiches, and I would like to request that my fellow delegates vote this down. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Faust, you are up, and then Pennsylvania Delegate Waldenberger is on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Faust.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent. I just wanted to speak in favor of Mr. Hayes' motion that we suspend any further efforts until we have all met in purpose or together, and that we can affirm the fact that a sandwich is far superior to a Pop-Tart.
Thank you, Mr. Faust. Mr. Waldenberger, you are up. And then Mr. Craig, you are on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
I can.
I would like to point, I guess this would be a point of information. Only pathetic statists would be wasting their time arguing whether a hot dog is a sandwich or not. Excuse me, lost my train of thought. For example, our Democratic governor and lieutenant governor are constantly in a Twitter battle over this, and they are the worst of all statists in our entire nation, in my opinion. Therefore, I request that we consider the real problem is cereal soup, and I yield my time.
Thank you. Mr. Craig from California. Michigan alternate Catherine Phyllis is on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Craig.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think we need to go to the original intent here. The sandwich was named after John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, born in 1718, died 1792, and an English aristocrat who served as Postmaster General, First Lord of the Admiralty, and Secretary of State for the Northern Department. Mr. Sandwich, or the Earl of Sandwich, was of course a British aristocrat, a member of the monarchical regime, and he was not only that, he was even worse, a Tory. Therefore, libertarians should not care, and the subject is irrelevant. We should not be using aristocratic titles in these United States. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Michigan alternate Catherine Phyllis, you are recognized, and then I will then go to our parliamentarian, Mr. Brown. Ms. Phyllis, go ahead.
Sure. So I buy vegan hot dogs, which are made of plants, and I eat them cut up with a fork. It is clear to me that hot dogs are salad. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phyllis. Mr. Brown, you are recognized, and Nevada Delegate Tim Hagan is on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got to say I was amused watching some of this debate, and I was really wishing there was a way here for people to raise a point of order, or for the parliamentarian to whisper into the chair's ear. But quite some time ago, I was going to suggest a point of order that one or two of the amendments were out of order, and also that members were not debating the proper secondary motions. They were debating the primary motion. But really the reason I left my hand up is just for you to consider, and for Dan Fishman to consider, that we perhaps need a way for people to make privileged motions or raise a point of order, because it took quite a while to get to me. Just an observation.
I believe that is the case, Mr. Brown. I would suggest that we figure out either, my suggestion would either be the clap indication or the need a break indication be the indication that a participant would use to indicate that they want to raise a privilege motion. I don't know how that's done on the phone. I think there are ways to do it, but something needs to happen
Mr. Chair?
so that people could raise a privilege motion. Mr. Fishman?
I believe that the assembled delegates will see a button on the bottom that says ask for help. If you click that, I will see your name saying that you are asking for help, at which point in time I can tell the chair I have an interruptible from somebody, or you can see.
And I think during the actual convention, we will have either staffers from Zoom or other volunteers who are able to recognize those things and provide information to the chair that I should stop in order to find out whether or not there is something that is in fact privileged. We're not there yet. This is, as far as I recall, we had hot dog being not a sandwich. We had an amendment to that. We had a motion to postpone that to a time certain at the physical convention. I think that's where we're at. I'm going to go to Nevada delegate Tim Hagan, and then Delaware delegate Thomas is going to be on deck. Mr. Hagan, go ahead.
I do not see that ask for help button Mr. Fishman was talking about. And I was going to want to raise a point of order that we're no longer debating the motion that Mr. Hayes asked for. So therefore, we'll call all questions.
Mr. Hagan would like to call all previous questions. Mr. Fishman, if you could poll, would you like to end debate on whether or not to postpone this to the in-person convention or something to that effect? That is the question on the table now. I will assume that it has objection, so we will poll it. All right, we're going to give it about 30 seconds. I will tell you about 15 seconds in, we're a solid 83 to 12% in favor of finishing this debate. So we may be done with this. At 30 seconds in, I have 160 yays, 24 nays, 10 abstains. We will call that question. So all in favor of postponing this question to the in-person meeting, we'll do a new poll. Mr. Fishman, if you could, if you're in favor of the motion, say yes. I don't know how you write the polls, but you know, in favor of the question, pose the question. But this is postponing it to the in-person meeting. So as far as postponing this to the in-person meeting, I have 77 yes, 104 no, and 14 abstain. So we will not be postponed to the in-person meeting. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, for that amendment. If someone can remind me of the amendment that we were on before we were trying to postpone it. I believe it was, we had hot dog not being a sandwich was the initial. We had something else after that. We go to Tennessee alternate William Patton. Let me unmute you. And then Kansas delegate Ned Kelly, you will be next. Go ahead, Mr. Patton.
I had actually wanted to call the question for Mr. Hayes, but I believe the amendment we were debating after is a sandwich, hot dog a sandwich, was a hot dog a taco.
Okay.
That's all I got. I was trying to make sure my hand stayed up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. Kansas delegate Ned Kelly. And then Mr. Lewis is on deck. Mr. Kelly, I'm trying to unmute you. I'm not sure if I'm able to.
Okay, thank you. I rise in favor of the current motion, which I believe is an amendment to the original motion. Just to clarify, I think I'm in the groove here. I believe the motion that the amendment that we're looking at right now is to clarify that all tacos are sandwiches. The original motion was that hot dogs are not sandwiches, but they are tacos. And this amendment would effectively say that all hot dogs are indeed tacos, but the tacos are also sandwiches. And I think if you care at all, if you care at all about this topic, you've got to shell out some time and consider what exactly is a sandwich. I stand in support of this sandwich.
I would ask everyone on the call to visit lpks.org/donate, provide a lot of money to Libertarian Party of Kansas, because Mr. Kelly's eating of this hot dog inside of that taco shell is quite disturbing and deserving of your money. I'm going to move to Tennessee delegate Daniel Lewis, and then California delegate Alicia Matson is on deck. Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of information. Are cheddar brats hot dogs?
I believe the ruling of the chair will be that cheddar brats are in fact hot dogs. They are a subspecies of hot dog, and I will count them as hot dogs. California delegate Alicia Matson, you are next.
Appeal the ruling of the chair.
Mr. Fishman, you are not able to appeal the ruling of the chair. You are a staff member.
Sorry.
California delegate Alicia Matson, you are next. And then Minnesota delegate Kay Camerad, you are on deck. Go ahead, Ms. Matson.
Being unable to raise points of order is a huge problem. I've tried various methods to, changing icons to get the chair's attention, to waving on camera, and none of them were effective. There have been various points of order I would have raised. Earlier, Mr. Perry was not allowed to move all previous questions because he debated, but that is allowed under Roberts. But for now, let's clarify what the pending questions are. The main motion was regarding, hot dog is not a sandwich, but is a taco. And the pending motion, I believe, is that a hot dog is both a taco and a sandwich. And perhaps this would go better had our secretary been able to actually enter this meeting, but she emailed the LNC, said she wasn't able to get in. So anyway, we need somebody recording motions because we don't even know what we're voting on at this point. But I believe the pending motion is hot dog is both a taco and a sandwich. And the main motion would be hot dog is not a sandwich, but is a taco.
Thank you, Ms. Matson. Ms. Camerad, you are up. Florida delegate Dieter, you are on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just needed to get credentialed in case I had anything important to say about this riveting debate on hot dogs and tacos.
How riveted are you?
Extremely, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Cameron. Mr. Dieter, you are up. Mr. Cahill, you are on deck.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say, one of the essences of the Libertarian Party is the fight against collectivism. And all of this general, conglomeration of various food types into broader and broader categories really goes against the spirit of the party, I think. So I would support the idea that all of these various food items are allowed to be themselves as individual food items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dieter. Mr. Cahill, you are up, and Mr. DaCosta, you are on deck. Mr. Cahill, I thought I had unmuted you, but go ahead.
All right, there we go. Yeah, I just want to echo what my fellow participant Dieter just mentioned. I'm in full agreement with him. I'm not a flavorologist by any means, but it's always seemed to me that taco, sandwich, hot dog, they're all merely ravioli in various stages of perfection or incompletion. Furthermore, we've gone with these definitions that we've referenced from supposed authority, sources of authority. We're in a weird place where a chicken cutlet meat surrounded by bread is a sandwich. An open-faced sandwich is actually a taco. I mean, these definitions they simply do not apply universally, and they seem to be furthered mainly by corporations that have their own interests at heart. So with that, I would conclude that it is really kind of like whatever you want it to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. Hawaii Delegate DaCosta with Georgia Delegate Nichols on deck.
Yes, although I appreciate Mr. Kelly from Kansas demonstration of eating a hot dog in a taco, I move to amend the motion to state that a hot dog is not a sandwich, period, with no reference to taco.
Is there a second to that motion? I'm looking for a yes icon. I see a second. So it's a motion that the hot dog is not a taco, Mr. DaCosta, is that right?
It's a motion that it's not a sandwich and no reference to tacos.
I'm trying to figure out how that can be in order. So you're amending the current motion to say that it is not a sandwich and not a taco?
Correct. No reference to tacos.
So a hot dog is a thing that is neither sandwich nor taco. Correct. That is your amendment. Okay, correct. That is what has been seconded. Would you like to speak to that?
To get your attention.
Ms. Matson, what was that?
The parliamentarian is waving for your attention.
Mr. Brown, go ahead.
Yes, I was. The motion is out of order because there's already a primary and a secondary motion on the floor.
I'm sorry, Mr. DaCosta, your motion is out of order.
I would suggest we leave Mr. Brown unmuted.
I think that's probably a wise decision given that he's parliamentarian. Mr. Nichols, go ahead. And then Mr. Daoud is on deck.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mr. Nichols.
So I've searched multiple definitions in regards to bread and sandwiches, and the key piece of information in these definitions is that the bread is sliced. I would say that a hot dog fully qualifies as a sandwich because that bread that it's on, whether it's a roll or what have you, is sliced. And hot dog technically qualifies as meat. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Dowd, you are up, and then Mr. Went is on deck. Mr. Dowd, I thought I had you on mute. There you are. Go
there
ahead.
I am. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would like to call the question on the motion to amend.
Okay. Remind me of the motion to amend.
The motion to amend is that a hot dog is actually a taco.
Okay, so we are calling the question on the hot dog being a taco. All in favor, so Mr. Fishman, if you could do a poll, all in favor of calling the question on whether a hot dog is a taco, yes or no? The poll is coming. That was the amendment, was the hot dog being a taco. Mr. Fishman is working on that poll.
Sorry, typo.
So if you would like to call the question on a hot dog being a taco, please vote yes. If you would like to not call that question and continue debate on whether a hot dog is a taco, please say no. We'll go to 30 seconds as we have with the previous polls. We are 30 seconds in, and I have 113 yes and some smaller number of no, and I don't know what exactly happened. I think Mr. Fishman pushed a button. 115 to 114, or sorry, 115 to 44. So we are going to call the question. We'll now move to a vote on, is a hot dog a taco? Mr. Fishman will do a poll on that. Yes, no, and abstain. Is a hot dog a taco? And that will resolve the amendment. Mr. Fishman, when you are ready. And yes, for those of you following along on home, I have had quite a bit of wine because that's what's necessary in order to preside over one of these meetings. The poll is up. Is a hot dog a taco?
The results are.
Still collecting results, Mr. Fishman, or
No, at 30 seconds I stopped, and these are the final results at 30 seconds.
So according to Mr. Fishman's poll, we have 35 people who say yes, a hot dog is a taco. 130 people who say no, hot dog is not a taco. And so the amendment is resolved. The hot dog is not a taco. Remind me, someone, of what the underlying motion was.
I believe it is a hot dog a sandwich.
It's a hot dog sandwich, correct?
Okay, and was it presented as a hot dog being a sandwich or a hot dog not being a sandwich? Just want to make sure I know where I'm at procedurally.
I believe it was a hot dog. It's a sandwich.
A hot dog is a sandwich is the underlying motion. All right, Mr. Dowd, you are up, and then Mr. Went is on deck. Mr. Dowd, you are up.
I called the question
There you are.
earlier, so this should be Francis's turn.
Did you? Okay. Well, then
I called the
will,
question. Yeah. Thank you.
I will lower your hand. Mr. Wendt, you are up, and Mr. Helmstetter, you are on deck.
Yes, I'm not sure if this is a point of
Sorry,
inquiry.
Mr. Wendt is up.
Yes.
You're almost up, Mr. Helmstetter, but I want to hear from Mr. Wendt first.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sounds good. So my question was, I'm not sure if it's a point of personal privilege or a point of order. It looks like the last two polls that we had were corrected in actually stating the motion. The first few polls did not actually state the motion. I was just wondering, I was wanting to request that we have the full text of what we're actually voting on in these polls.
I'll do my best moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Wendt. Mr. Helmstetter, you are up. And then Ms. Law, you are on deck.
Point of order. I had a lot of interesting ideas to add to the debate, including extending the debate, but I've noticed on the phone, I wanted to pass this along. If you're in line with your hand raised, if you vote yes or no on the app on the phone, you get out of line. And I was keeping track of some names on paper. And so that may be something y'all want to test, because people don't have to return to their delegation every time we vote on something. If they're waiting in line, if we roll call, you still count their hands. And so that's just something I wanted to raise, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Helmstetter. Ms. Law, you are up. And then I have Delaware Delegate Thomas, who is on deck. Go ahead, Ms. Law.
I just wanted to chime in and make sure that we were actually being fair to the bun. A sandwich is, by design, 2 pieces of bread. I have cut buns in the past and actually cut all the way through, causing the bun to have 2 parts. So that would dictate a sandwich. So we just want to not forget about the bun. It's made of the same ingredients as the bread. And you can also butterfly a hot dog as well. So a hot dog is a sandwich.
Thank you, Ms. Law.
Chair.
There's a point of information from where?
Delaware Delegate Will McVeigh.
Mr. McVeigh, is this point of information privileged? Go ahead.
It is. First of all, I made the original amendment, so I'm wondering what exactly are we voting on here? Because I believe the amendment that I made was regarding it being both a hot dog being both a sandwich and a taco, and I don't think that's what was reflected in the poll that we just answered. So I'm a little confused as to what's going on here. And I also have a point of order, point of privilege, orders of the day, name it, whatever sort of privilege you'd like to attach here, and that I've been trying to get your attention for the last probably 15, 20 minutes with these points, and also going as far back as the motion to postpone and whether or not people were supposed to be debating that or the underlying motions. And I would like to get some sort of firm and determinative answer as to how we're supposed to raise a privileged motion at this point, because none of the mechanisms that have been suggested by the chair up to this point seem to have been effective.
So privileged motions are a giant pain in the ass. I appreciate you raising it. I get confused about where we're at too. That's kind of the nature of this weird sandwich thing that we're doing. I don't know the right way to get a privilege motion up to bubble up. I think we probably need to specify ahead of time what thing like the coffee cup might create a privilege motion, and then have the parliamentarian deal with the individual. And so it's tricky, and I don't have a solid answer for you, Mr. McVeigh. I'm going to go to the other Delaware delegate, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 things real quick. One, I was originally in line right before a Nevada delegate, Tim Hagan. For some reason, I got skipped, but I've been patient, so thank you for that. I just wanted to share with all my fellow delegates and alternates that just up the road here from Wilmington, Delaware, The Philadelphia cheesesteak or steak sandwich, as it's known around here, was a derivative of the hot dog. The creator of the cheesesteak, Pat, sold hot dogs, and he got tired of eating hot dogs. And so he started to slice really thin slices of beef and the steak and put it in his hot dog rolls. At which point taxi drivers said, "Hey, what are you eating? We'd like to try that." And he said, "Okay." And he became so profitable that Pat's is still there, as are a plethora of other cheesesteak shops, as also featured in the wonderful 1976 movie Rocky. You can see Pat's. I highly recommend it if you're ever in Philadelphia. Delaware also has some really good cheesesteaks, at least the ones in northern Delaware. So thank you all very much for your time, and I appreciate you recognizing me. Thank you.
All right. I have Nebraska alternate David Demarest, followed by Pennsylvania delegate Matt Baltzar. Go ahead, Mr. Demarest.
Mr. Chair, I call the question.
Mr. Demarest has called the question. Assuming there's no objection to calling the question, we'll move the previous question. I believe we are on an amendment saying that a hot dog is also a taco. So we'll deal with that first. Then I believe that the underlying motion is that a hot dog is not a sandwich. But I'm going to ask for people to double check me on that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I believe we are on the final motion. I believe that we defeated the amendment about being a taco.
It appears that the hot dog being a taco was defeated by a pretty substantial margin. So we're on the motion about, just repeat it for me, Mr. Demarest.
The motion was that a hot dog is a sandwich.
Okay. So we're on the final motion of whether or not a hot dog is a sandwich. I would ask that we do it by yeses and nos. So the motion is a hot dog is a sandwich. If you agree yes, hit yes. If you agree no, a hot dog is not a sandwich, hit no. And we will count those up and we'll go from there.
People may not be aware, the yes, no buttons are at the bottom of the participant window. If you click on that, you'll see yes, no.
All right, we have, we're still doing a hot dog, whether a hot dog is a sandwich or not. Yeses and nos are coming in. I have at present 51 yeses and 75 nos. At present, it appears that a hot dog is not a sandwich, according to the votes so far. And we're at 53 to 76. I'm still going to say that that is a defeated motion. A hot dog is not a sandwich. You're done with that motion. A hot dog is not a sandwich by the votes that I have. It is 10 o'clock. We have been doing this for a solid 2 hours past when we were starting. My inclination is to stop doing this for tonight.
Mr. Chair, you're going to steal my thunder.
Might I, Mr. Baltzar? Go ahead.
I was about to say I have finished my beer and I am now working on my reserve bourbon, so I motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion to adjourn is always in order. Mr. Fishman, if you could run, well, actually, we'll just do yeses and nos. Turn off your yeses and nos. All in favor of adjournment, hit yes. All opposed to adjournment, hit no. and we'll see where we're at. At present, the yeses are 123 and the nos are 13. So I think we will be adjourned at 10 p.m. to 10:01. Thank you all for participating tonight. I do appreciate it. Again, this is just a test. We're going to keep doing this. We'll do this again on Friday. We'll do it again on Sunday. We will keep doing it until we get it as right as we can. And thank you again. Have a great night.
You as well. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.